Rolling? All right, cool. So the way that I do the podcast, we're recording right now, yeah. So the way that I do it is I cut out anything that seems superfluous or unnecessary.
Okay.
And I just start the thing wherever it would make sense to start listening to it.
Yep.
From the listener's end.
Speaking of superfluous and unnecessary.
Those words. Trying to
Got
keep it impressive. That's a perfect
Just fucking podcast already, man. We know what we're doing.
So, anyways, thanks so much for making this happen, man.
Fuck yeah, man. I'm glad you're out.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I have been enjoying the book, and I've been curious upon reading it. I feel like my perception of you is mostly from like Aubrey Marcus, kind of like Dos Equis man of supplements. Like it seems like what I get from you is this image. I'm curious, what was the image before Onnit and all that? Was there kind of a consistency of personality in that, or has this changed you quite a bit?
Well, I think there's an evolution as you grow older and as you transition out of certain phases. You know, I think leading up to the foundation of Onnit, I was pretty unhappy because I knew I had a greater purpose than what I was doing. You know, I was screwing around. I had a marketing company. I was selling everything from, you know, fake vagina sex toys to gold mines, oil and gas to skincare, all kinds of doing stuff all across the board. And nothing was satisfying because it wasn't my own product. I didn't believe in the mission of the companies that I was working to sell their products for. So I transitioned that into working out hard and partying my dick off. And that was pretty much the plan for, you know, Aubrey Marcus 1.0. And, you know, that was my life before then. So I had a reputation as that. You know, I still had the spiritual tendencies. I mean, I went on my first vision quest when I was 18. So I was 12 years deep into my own experiential spirituality before Onnit. And that was always a part of me. But there was also a, you know, current of deep kind of unhappiness and anxiety about where I was in life and what I was contributing to the planet that, you know, kind of drove me towards some different forms of escapism.
What was the spirit quest at 18?
So, yeah, I mean, our family grew up, you know, pretty atheist. And that was reinforced when I went to the dungeons of the Inquisition in Italy, which was, you know, and as everybody knows, the Inquisition was the Catholics going out and punishing and torturing heretics or anybody they thought was a witch or anybody they didn't like. You know, just a rampant abuse of power in the name of God, using that certainly in quotations because there's nothing short of demonic torture devices in this dungeon. And, you know, just kind of thinking about all of the wars and all of the strife that religion has caused. And then not only that, but seeing it played out as I went to high school here in Texas and saw people horribly shamed and horribly guilty for their natural sexual impulses. I was like, you know, screw this. And so I became like an even more staunch atheist. And then, you know, I went on a vision quest in the mountains and took some psilocybin. And I didn't know it was psilocybin at the time. I knew it was a mushroom tea with a shaman. And felt my body evaporate. And when my body evaporated, and I realized that there was something still there, my consciousness or my spirit or whatever that was, I started to go, oh shit. Well, I guess maybe I got half of the equation right in that religions did abuse power and did guide things the wrong way.
Right.
But there's something more to life than this body. And I just felt it and I just experienced it. And now I'm going to have to figure this shit out.
How do you carry that kind of separation from... So you feeling like you were kind of lost or feeling like tormented or feeling like kind of attached to this body or attached to expectations. Has there been some kind of like ongoing practices of kind of unwinding that shit? Or is that something that's been an ongoing kind of luggage that's been carried around through the years?
I mean, it's been really, I have carried a bunch of luggage and a bunch of shit, and I've had a variety of offloading techniques, you know, any way that I can still the mind and get in touch with the big now, that, you know, kind of presence, tap into that either flow state or tap into that meditative state, you know, that's great. But probably the biggest thing is I'm really living my purpose now. You know, my podcast is reaching a lot of people. This company that I built is serving a lot of people in a lot of great ways and inspiring people. And so, you know, when you're living your purpose, it's naturally feels a lot better for the heart. And then it's just about working on the mental processes that are self-defeating, those points of resistance that come up, those fears, fear being that one virus at the root of everything, figuring out how to deal with that, and continuing to push myself towards greater truth and greater happiness.
You're familiar with John DeMartini?
Mm-mm.
Oh, he's good, man. I recommend him. He's got kind of an interesting haircut, but he's a tremendous dude. But one of the things he gets into, he has a super interesting background where his body was completely destroyed, essentially. Like so many people, they come from places of extreme handicap, and that's ends up being their gift, essentially. But he talks about focusing on your values and kind of letting go of the other parts. I feel like most of us were so stuck adding energy into all these stupid little superfluous bullshit activities, and we have maybe like 10% of our energy to actually go into our value or our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Have you defined any degree of like what the hell Aubrey is doing here? What are the highest values for you?
Yeah, it's something that I reiterate in my journal every night, is like, what is my mission? And my mission is to have a lot of fun, help other people have fun too, and do that by expanding human consciousness. We really are the gaolers of our own prison. Like, we have the keys to unlock so much of our own mental suffering and our own grief, and enjoy this, really this kingdom of heaven. Now I'm using a religious term after being atheist my whole life, but seeing this life here on this planet and the availability we have to move, to play, to eat, to meet people, to interact, to enjoy this experience. I mean, this is the kingdom of heaven if we get our mind out of the way and can really enjoy it. And of course, understand there's extenuating circumstances. People all get all flustered, like, well, what if you're fucking held captive? Like, I get it. There's some shitty situations. But for most of us, really it's our own mind and our own self-defeating thoughts that are preventing us from like incredible joy and incredible bliss. And I know because I was one of those people. I've been in places that are heavenly all around me and been in immense suffering myself, and I've found the keys to the locks to let myself out of that cage.
What does the fear look like for you these days? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, man. I think it's less and less. I mean, I've gone like headlong into the fears, right? Like open relationship, another great example. Like that is deep insecurity, deep challenge to the ego. And the ego is really where a lot of these fears generate. It's always seeking validation because it doesn't have a real grounding root in anything. It's just a projection of the mind, this identity that we try and carry and defend. So it's constantly looking for validation, and open relationship is going to challenge the hell out of that, and it's going to really challenge your own worth and all of these things. And I think that's been a really powerful tool, like a grindstone to sharpen my own spirit against the forces of fear. And working on fears in my own body, that's another level that I'm really trying to get through, the fear of suffering in my body, either through illness or through injury or something along those lines. But I just look at these fears as things that, obstacles to be overcome. And in the overcoming comes the gift of the strength to overcome them, and becomes that superpower, and also becomes the ability for me to talk to other people about them. So, there's still fears lurking around somewhere in the shadows. And whenever I see them, whenever I spot them, sometimes with the help of some psychedelics, sometimes with the help of introspection, I spot them, I go hunt for them, and I go see if I can find the right key to unlock them.
Yeah, I like the idea of we don't see the present moment. We just kind of see things through the filter of our past. I'm reading a book by Joe Dispenza. Actually, that's a lie. I'm not reading. I'm listening to a book by Joe Dispenza right now. You Are the Placebo.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Have you gotten into that one?
Oh, yeah. Finished it.
God.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So chapter 2 or 3 or whatever it is, just gets into all these scientific, like, case study after case study of how the power of placebo, the power of our mind.
Yep.
And it's just really fascinating to me to get into the awareness that when we see the world, we don't see the world for what it is. We see the world through the filter of our past.
Yeah.
So starting to have that conversation of, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm kind of catching up with myself. There's always this race of what's actually happening here and the momentum of the wave that is all that, and coming to terms with that seems like.
Yeah. At a certain point, like the great Toltec spiritual masters and a lot of different people, they all talk about at a certain point, you can just dump your past and just be like, oh, yeah, that was me of yesterday. I'm different now. That's my favorite quote of all time, is that quote from Heraclitus. No man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Like, right. At any given point, you can just say, oh yeah, that was the old me. This is the new me. New me's operating under different rules. And it'll take other people maybe a little while. Like, people like to think of you as the past self because they like consistency. And I've certainly challenged, people in that way. And, and sometimes you'll think you're on a new, you think you're on a new level, and then you retreat back to an old one. Nothing is a straight line. Yeah. But yeah, at any point you can just kind of drop the past and decide who you want to be from the future. That's the power of the mind. Now, the body is a little slower. The body takes a little bit more nurturing. It kind of bends to the light, like a tree branch will bend to the sun, like roots go down searching for water. It'll go a little slower than the mind, but the mind can decide who you want to be at any given point. And that's something that people will try and tell you that is not possible, but it totally is. And I've seen it happen, and I've done it myself, sometimes successfully, sometimes I've been kidding myself, but I know that it's possible because I've done it.
Yeah. What are practices that you're doing on a daily basis? Like, what sticks for you?
For me, it's an accumulation of a lot of different things. There's not like one smoking gun. I kind of have to throw the whole kitchen sink at it. So that's a combination of regular exercise, like regular breathing practices, regular cold or heat exposure, solid nutrition, and then some form of mindfulness. Generally a nap is going to be super helpful for me throughout the day. And then every once in a while, I kind of binge, and I'll either fast for a few days and do some kind of retreat that way, or a juice cleanse, or a psychedelic journey, or something that really helps me go to even deeper territory where I can really hunt for those deeper fears and unravel some of the things that in my conscious mind I'm unaware of.
In the Joe Dispenza stuff, something that was kind of making me percolate was the idea of this placebo stuff, and a lot of the dis-ease that we create in ourselves is we're creating in ourselves, and a lot of the work that we're doing, oftentimes the work is almost in the way of us getting into ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we're on this ongoing thing. Okay, I have the perfect supplement, and I have the perfect this, the perfect that. And it's like, that's a fucking illusion.
Because a lot of it's fear-based too, right? Like, if you don't do it, we're afraid of the outcome, right? So we're actually just bathing ourselves in fear. I had that real insight recently. I tend to wash my hands a lot, and I had this insight where I was like, okay, so maybe I get a modicum improvement in germ protection by washing my hands. But I'm literally bathing myself in fear and vulnerability every time I do that. Like, oh, let me wash some fear and vulnerability all over my hands. Let me physically signal to my body that it's, available to get ill at any given moment from the environment that's full of all these harmful things, And that was a really strong realization. Now, have I completely transcended that need to over sanitize my hands? No, but I'm mindful of it now, and I'm transitioning out of that because, of course, like, maybe every once in a while I'll knock a germ off my hands, but the repeated behavior of just reinforcing that fear and that idea that I could get sick at any given moment, like, it's definitely a net loss.
Yeah. And then with that, ironically, the individual knocking the bacteria off their hands ends up, folks say that there could be a correlation at that to like autoimmune disease. In fact, that you could almost look at that as being an autoimmune disease in and of itself.
Yeah, right. That's fucked up. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
If we can kind of like bathe in our own dirt a little bit, all of a sudden we come to a point where it's like, okay, like I think there is some health value there in just that acceptance. If you can accept the thing all of a sudden you can like take a breath and you're not continually holding yourself in this straitjacket, keeping yourself from experiencing the world.
Looking around the world, like, everything in the world is dangerous, and like everything in the world is going to fucking kill you. And that's a big problem that people in our industry have. They'll read a book like Wheat Belly. They'll have grown up Italian, eating pasta and pizza their whole life. And then they have a bite of wheat and they're on the floor rolling around holding their stomach. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, that's not the fucking gluten. That's your fucking mind.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure. Maybe there's some things in there, that you want to worry about, and sprouted's better and fermented's better. But your mind is what's fucking you up right now. And that's something that a lot of people don't do enough work around.
Is this psychedelic medicine, has that been one of the highest leverage points for you?
Yeah, because I'm a like really stubborn, knuckle-headed monkey. You know, I need like a fucking sledgehammer to knock me out of my own way, and I need a heavy sledgehammer too. You know, I'm not a microdose guy. I'm like a macro dose guy, and yeah, it's been incredibly valuable for me. Now, I don't recommend that to everybody. I mean, it's in certain cases, it's really a trial by fire, and you have to really pick the right set and the right setting, the right intention, the right medicine at the right time with the right integration. Like, a lot of things have to go right for that to be a valuable tool. But for me, I wouldn't be fucking a fraction of who I am if it wasn't for that. I mean, I know that unequivocally.
Yeah, the setting thing, I think, is a really big part. Yeah, is there any kind of, like, what's an ideal setting for you? What could that look like?
Well, it depends on the intention. First of all, I mean, you want somebody there, especially if you're starting out, you know, you want somebody there who's a really solid guide. Yep. And that guide needs to be really clean in their energy, not trying to push too hard, not attached to the outcome, but who really knows the medicine and can kind of hold the space, is what you would call it. And that's really important, because at a certain point, you know, if you're wondering, like a lot of the bad trips, like the bad experiences, are because you're wondering, like, am I going to die? Did I take too much of this shit? Right. Am I okay? Are the cops going to come get me? You know, like, those are the questions that are running through your head, and that just distracts you from doing any actual useful work. So setting that is like the very baseline. And I think a lot of people, they also just do too much and do it in the wrong environment. You know, minimum effective dose applies to any medicine. Yep. You know, you want to do just enough to get the results that you're looking for and not overdose it. So that's also very important. I mean, I tend to go to a traditional context, you know, to do most of my medicine work, like shamans that have been working with the medicine for a long time, or a clinical context where it's a psychiatrist or you know, some kind of doctor who's administering. I've been fortunate to do both. But in either case, you know, it can be pretty incredibly valuable.
Yeah. How about microdosing versus macros?
I mean, microdosing is not something I have a ton of experience with, and I've found that it's mildly helpful, but I think that's more helpful for people who have, like, perhaps depressive tendencies and other conditions that are kind of underlying that they're dealing with every day, maybe some kind of generalized anxiety disorder, some kind of depression, where you're just taking a sub-noticeable amount of something to help subtly alter your neurochemistry. Like, really what I'm doing when I take psychedelics is I'm hunting for truth at the end of the spectrum. Yep. You know, I'm hunting for a massive pattern interrupt of, like, some thought pattern, some loop that I can burst out of into a new reality of even deeper truth, and then come back and reintegrate that into my whole paradigm. So that's been the primary utilization for me. But again, that's for me, because that can be, if you do that too fast, if you burst too many layers of your paradigm, then all of a sudden your brain is just like, you know, fucking turkey chili, you know, and you're just like, what the hell is going on here? You know, you're all scrambled up. Is that a garbanzo bean? Like, I don't even know what's going on in here.
Yeah, it's almost like you need the scaffolding to keep up with the
right.
building.
Right.
You know, you need to have the support group. You need to have the environmental shift. I think that's something that happens with myself, a lot of people, where you have some type of big download or whatever, but then your environment doesn't really change. Yeah. Or you're not actually set up in such a way that you can create any of that change that you saw with your experience. So now you're just back to where you're at.
Yeah.
You know, so having that balance between what you actually do in your sober reality and that experience. Have you seen that transition happen with you?
Well, for sure. And also because I've been dragging my environment with me, you know, and right. that's part of the blessing that I have to be in the position that I'm in, that my inner circle, you know, those people who are closest to me are all, you know, kind of bonded by a lot of the same rituals. You know, we've all right. gone down to Peru together, not all, but all gone down to Peru together, all done ceremony together, all experienced medicines together, all gather not just for partying or, you know, working out, but also for, you know, conscious ritual gatherings to explore different concepts, and, you know, dinners where we're exploring different philosophical ideas. Like, we'll push ourselves in that direction so that when any of us have some kind of ecstatic or breakthrough experience, you know, we have a whole support group that's there to understand, to see them, to acknowledge them, and help hold people accountable to that next level.
Yeah. What's the vision here in yourself in the next 5-10 years? It's a big question.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I want to live in greater accord to the laws of love and truth and what I know now to be God, which is just the synonym for those former two words, love and truth, and just really actually, to be honest, man, us hanging out in California was significant for me. In that I think I had one of the missing pieces was to really truly own elevating my body to the level of divinity and not kind of leaving it as like a transitionary piece. But
the meat body is what
right.
I'm like, fucking meat, stop calling it the meat body. Respect the meat body. Christ.
Yeah. But, while it's here, it's sacred, and it doesn't mean that you should get overly attached to it because it's sure as shit going to be gone.
Yeah.
So you can't hang everything on it and make it overly important. But while it's here, it's your home. And I think really respecting your home in that way, it's like if all you did was call your house like, oh, that shitty place I lived for a little while,
right.
Instead of calling it your home.
Right. It's where I do my business.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to that fucking shitty place. It's always fucked up. And I'm going to go sleep there, no, it's your home. Like you want to like really own that. And I've always tried to take care of it, but I haven't really owned that, because I think there's been some fear around it again. I used to get sick a lot as a child, and still my immune system has its challenges innately. And I think it created a lot of fear around my body, and it created this desire for me to create distance. So as I've been working since, we saw each other, really kind of putting that back as a central focus of like what is sacred about being alive and really work through and address those fears in the body has been a valuable practice.
What's popped up?
Well, I think that there's always been a intermediary communicator between my consciousness, my higher self, my divine self. You can call it a billion different things, but that thing that transcends this lifetime, that part of me, and my body have always had a translator, and that translator was my ego. And so that both were communicating through this like really faulty, diluted, like the worst communicator. It'd be like two adults trying to communicate through a 3-year-old, like, okay, go tell so-and-so this. And
the translator.
Yeah, and the 3-year-old just wants to fucking eat sugar and get scared and be hysterical and like fuck off. And I was able to really kind of, through some very intentional work, connect kind of my consciousness with my body and start to have that dialogue in an even greater way. And that's everything from, I just threw a crazy 37th birthday party. And at some point in the middle of the night, I go into the bathroom and finish up at the mirror, and I'm looking at myself. It's like, all right, body, like, what would you like? It's like, well, no more alcohol, please. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
that sounds good. And I was like, what about tobacco? It's like, no, probably not any more tobacco. But I just kept asking questions, and it was like, first of all, I need some water, and then I need some minerals, and then at this time, you can probably do that. Because you're going to be, and I had this like really cool dialogue, even in what could have been the most unconscious setting possible, but like a cool dialogue with my body that I was intentionally putting under duress. My body's like, no, I got you. Like, I understand what your goal is here, but if you listen to me, it'll make this whole thing much smoother. And it did. I had one of the best nights ever, and it didn't destroy the weekend, and it worked out, pretty ideally. But I don't think I would have had that consciousness to really, as my conscious self, my soul self, communicate straight with my body, removing my ego from the equation and saying, well, I want to do this, or I want to do this, or I'm scared about this, or blah, blah, blah. Just creating that direct dialogue was fucking huge.
Yeah. What does a low point look like for you these days?
There used to be really low points.
Yeah.
Like really, really low points. And there are less of those now. There's exhaustion points. And those tend to be, and I can go into some of the older low points too. But right now, it's just pure exhaustion. It's just losing the battle against the forces of entropy, trying to take my energy and disperse it into the projects and creations. Because I just have a lot going on right now. Yeah. So sometimes I won't be mindful of that, and I'll push too much out and not give myself enough rest. Like there was, part of the time I saw you in Cali, I was going through that, and it was just sheer physical exhaustion.
Yeah.
And that tends to be the predominant low point now, but it used to be like massive self-doubt, massive depression, like crippling chest tightening anxiety that I couldn't find where it was exactly coming from. It just seemed generalized, massive approval seeking and fear around the absence of that validation, deep, dark, emotional triggers from my open relationship with my fiance, like all kinds. I mean, I've had all varieties of those different down points, illnesses that I couldn't get to go away, sinus infections, whatever,
There's, I think this might have been Martini again, but some kind of little meme, if it gets repressed, it will be expressed. And I think that's one of those interesting things, like relationships. You could selfishly say every relationship is for your own self-development.
Yeah.
And having a child, it's like, anything that little dickhead ends up doing, painting the walls or whatever it is, like, oh, that's you. That's the part of you that you're insecure or whatever it may be. And now here it is. You have to deal with it. We have those, we can look at those moments as being kind of like, like never waste a trigger is another thing I've heard. When you have that moment of like, it's not like, oh, fuck, just like, let's wig out. It's like we can actually, kind of stand back and sit with that.
Yeah. Use it as your sadhana, your spiritual practice.
Yeah.
No matter what happens. Oh, okay. Here's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah. So what was the dark stuff? The dark chest imploding stuff?
Well, I think I've always felt like I had a big mission, and I was always really afraid of not living up to that, like not living up. And I would externalize it in different people who would be like the external judges that, either, business partners or father figures or different people along that way. My mom was such a overwhelmingly unconditionally loving human that I tend to project a lot of my validation seeking on the men in my life. And so, I think that was part of it, but I think really it stemmed from my own fears of, I know I have a lot to give, and what if I don't do it? What if I fail myself, and what if I fail the world? And really worrying about the outcome rather than just focusing on the process. Like, all I can do is do my best, and I think it goes back to that warrior ethos of, it's okay if you go to battle and you get slain and you go out on your shield. What's not okay is if you're running away, you trip on a rock and get trampled. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or take an arrow in your back because you're running from your destiny. You know what I mean? As long as I go through the process and I give it my best, that's all I'm responsible for. And then if I really anchor to that, then all the anxiety just starts to melt.
But then Bob Marley would disagree in his Live to Fight Another Day. However he says, warrior something, if you run away, you live to fight another day. What is that? Is that Bob Marley? You guys might know. You know what I'm talking about,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, so I think there is something to knowing when to be like, you know what, maybe I should fucking get the hell out of here.
Sure. Because you don't want to charge. Yeah, you don't want to charge against a windmill. You don't want to overexert yourself. But in totality, right, you can't run away from the big fight. You can run away from a battle, but you can't run away from your mission.
Yeah.
Running away from a battle is just strategy. As long as your mission is still to win the war. Like, look at George Washington. If he lined up and went straight at the British, there wouldn't be a United States of America.
Yeah.
That's a stupid idea. So he would in and out, flirt and go in and out, and know the backwater channels, and that's just being a smart general.
Yeah.
But no one would ever say, oh, George Washington was running away. No, he was just. And I think that's what Bob means really, is he's talking about those small battles. Like, know when to engage in the small battles, but never run away from your war, never run away from your mission.
Yeah. You got some downloads from Selig. I'm jealous.
Fuck yeah. Yeah.
I've been listening to, I think I've logged maybe 15 hours or so of him channeling whoever he's channeling. What does he call him? There's a name for him. The guides, but then they have a name for them.
Melchizedek.
Perfect. Yeah, the Melchizedeks. When we first had the conversation of the meat body thing, I kind of checked myself because there was things that I actually disagreed with when I was saying respect the meat body and all that, and then you kind of had a counter with that of there is a lot beyond that meat body, and you mentioned there's I think you got it from Selig. There's 5 levels or something like that. Do you remember you mentioned something along those lines? There's the big self, the small self, and then apparently there was some tiers that he was mentioning.
That's not from Selig, although I might have confirmed a few of my different thoughts.
I was hoping to hear it in Selig. So I was like, where's this thing?
No, I think that was partly from the South American shamans that I've worked with, and partly from Selig, and partly me and the guides, and partly me kind of piecing together my own kind of metaphysical understanding of things. So I can go into that if you want.
Please, yeah. I was curious about it. Yeah. And then you left, and I was like, oh.
So, all right. So there's, different levels of existence, and we exist in all of those different levels. So first, let's take our body, where we're at right now, this material world, the sound coming in through your ears, life, the chair that you're sitting in, if you're in the car, all the things around you, like existence in material form. All right. And then that's one dimension. Let's call that dimension 1. And then let's tether that with an imaginary thread all the way through the dimensional layers, and let's tether that from our heart, and tether that all the way through to what I call the unicity, which is all things. So imagine the universe collapsing back into a single point, which astronomically they believe happened for the Big Bang, this collapsing of the entire universe into the size of probably less than a thumbnail. They don't know exactly how small it gets because it's all kind of theoretical at that point.
Yeah.
At that point, that's what I call the unicity. That's where, all of the known, all of the manifest, and also, I believe, as they're connected, as above, so below, as Hermes Trismegistus says, all of the spiritual entities, and everything collapses back into one point, which is God. Call it God, call it whatever, call it the universe, call it whatever you want, but I call it God. So we have one point here in the body connected all the way through this thread back to God as one expressed force without any differentiation. Everything, just a dense point of energy that is God. So that's the final dimension. Now we just got to piece in the layers in between, right? So, because we exist at all those levels. There's the divine in us. There's that piece of the unicity that we carry. And then there's also all of the physical form that we carry as well. And depending on our identification point, we can identify as any of those in between. So then I think along down the line, there's the first kind of split between that God energy. And that first split is what a lot of, in the New Age circles, they'd call the celestial realm. And that's like larger archetypal, groups, gatherings, kind of like collectives. Maybe think of them like continents. If God is the world, these are like the continents. And there's like the resistance continent, and then there's the assistance continent, which could be Jesus and Lucifer if you wanted to do like the initial two splits, like the two hemispheres of the world, basically, right? And then there's different, kind of larger archetypes that kind of come, at that level. And then going down, breaking that down a little bit smaller. So you could call that one-dimensional layer that you can access. And then breaking down an even smaller level, then you get to like what you would call the astral or kind of the soul level, which is an identity form that you carry that extends beyond this body and can interact with other beings, other entities. It's where the guides are from, basically. Right. Still retaining some form of personality, still retaining some free will, some choice, some interaction, but, in this kind of quantum world. And I feel like I've traveled to that quantum world, both in meditation and in journey. And it's really wild. It's not like 3D where things are happening. It's like anything that you want to call to your attention comes to your attention, and anything you want to dispel comes there. So you're in full like black space, but it's fully quantum. And then you travel into form through the sacred geometry, which is, I think, what you see when you go into psychedelic, and that's part of the bridge that connects you to these other kind of soul level entities. It's the bridge of light and the bridge of form. Takes you through the sacred geometry, what you would call like maybe the lower astral and that, chrysanthemum, and then all the way back into physical form. But we're all of those things. We're this string tethered from that physical dimension that we're in now all the way to the unicity. And it just depends on our identification point as to where we are.
I'm gonna have to repeat that several times, I think. Thank baby Jesus.
Yeah,
I don't
know. I don't explain that very often because I'm usually talking about more like practical things.
I'm pretty sure I agree with all of it.
Yeah, well, this is based on it's based a lot on my experience, and people might think I'm a fucking kook, but this is what I've felt, I
mean, you're a kook, but not because of that.
I am for sure a kook. I am for sure a kook.
So when we were at Earth Cafe, I noticed you popped out your little notebook. And you were taking little scribbles. What are you putting there?
I mean, I don't remember that particular scribble, but
It was you were scribbling.
I was scribbling. What was I? What was
Oh
going
no,
on
not
there?
what was the scribble. No, I don't care what the
Oh.
scribble was, unless
It's
you
like,
remember. That's
damn,
great.
damn, no.
no,
I don't remember.
No, just the practice of having a notebook, scribbles, like.
Yeah, that was any idea that I get that I feel like is advancing my own philosophy or advancing my understanding in a certain way. I'll take it. And sometimes it's when I'm going through some kind of challenging thing and I'm figuring out ways to get myself out of a maze. I'll be like, oh, okay, well, let me notate this way to get out of the maze. Or sometimes it's, a clever quote or an idea, that I came up with, or something that I could use in a future book or a future post, or, generally if I'm scribbling something fast, it's just a thought that occurred. And I think, honestly, working with you that week actually opened up, kind of set me up for another path that I knew I should take, which was like elevating the body back to a priority position. And I think I was starting to get downloads regarding that, which was cool because, you meet a lot of people and a lot of the people, even the shamans, there's a form of escapism from the body, where they're almost more comfortable in the astral than they are comfortable in their physical form. And that's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. Like what are those, the ascetics in India, who like just kind of let their body rot and they're just focused on their spirit. Like, okay, it's a choice, but I don't think it's the best choice. I think the best choice is to enjoy the vehicle while you got it. The goal isn't to transcend the game. If you want to transcend the game, just fucking jump off a cliff. Like you can get out. You can get out of this thing pretty easily. Like if you want to live in the astral, fucking go. What's holding you back? Like go for it. But that's not the point, because this time that we live in and this opportunity to be in this body is fucking rad, and it's worth it. And it's worth experiencing it to the fucking fullest. Yeah. So, I just think this kind of obsession with getting to the end point, like, all right, hurry up if you want, but I'm going to take the slow road, and I'm going to try and enjoy this thing as long as I can.
Yeah. Selig talks about getting those little download ideas as being kind of like gifts, and you should value it, since like when you get one of those little ideas, I think we can kind of hone our instrument or our receiver, and we'll start probably receiving better or worse ideas, ideally better ideas. But when you get them, I think too often we just kind of let them go. We're just in that pattern of just like, oh, that might be a great thing, but I have my job to do. I'm just going to keep on working.
It's so bad when you have one of those things and you let it go and then you can't resuscitate it.
Somebody else, Aubrey Marcus grabs it now. Here's on it.
It's crazy when that shit happens. I don't know. I'll think about it. I'm like, what was that thing? So yeah, I always try to at least get it down, and I tend to like not do anything with them until I'll have these periods where I can really catch up, and then I'll like take my whole journal and be like, all right, just sort through it, go to a Google Doc, and then type in everything that I have in my journals. I'll look through my voice notes and be like, oh shit, there's some fucking gold in here. Yeah. I just forgot about it. But I know that at least if I get it down, no matter where it is, then I'll have a chance at getting it back.
So I'm in that place now. I have 2 of my notebooks that I brought here, which I'm kind of like a hoarder of ideas and notes and all that.
Yeah.
And it's the organization of them that's equally important to the actually receiving the idea.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, do you have any practices around organizing? You mentioned Google Docs.
Yeah, Google Docs are how I do everything. Like I don't that is the home for me of all my ideas, written works, because it's available and accessible anywhere. And then I have, like a folder structure that's kind of really set up, and that's the way that I know that it counts. Like until it's in Google Docs, it's only half real.
Right.
And then once it's in Google Docs, it's like it's real.
Yeah.
And it exists. It's in the cloud.
Do you do categories?
Yeah, tons of categories. So it's just different, depending on what the idea is surrounding and what the format is. If it's a fragment of poetry, it'll go in the poetry section. If it's a spiritual idea, it'll go in this. If it's for a future book that's upcoming, it'll be in that. I'll just keep a collection of notes, like on Love and Delusion, which is probably going to be my next book. I have a bunch of notes that I'm collecting there, and try to keep it all organized.
That's cool. You write fiction as well. We're not
I
supposed
do.
to talk about that.
No, yeah, you can. I'd love to write fiction. One day I'll earn my way into writing some fiction and having some fun with that. I used to write a lot more. I used to write, short stories and long form poetry, and I love writing fiction, but now I've got 3 books. Well, this one and then 2 more in particular that must come out before I really start engaging in fiction. But I did get sidetracked trying to come up with 50 Shades of Grey meets Guardians of the Galaxy erotic fiction
Perfect.
novel.
Perfect.
But, that's a real sidetrack.
We've all been waiting for it. I think you're the chosen one for that.
Yeah.
Someone needs to birth it.
Yeah.
That's tight. What's the fiction that you're presently doing? Is that is the fiction? You're like in a book right now with the fiction.
No, not really. I actually, while you were there, ironically, I was actually writing a piece of the Guardians of the Galaxy meets 50 Shades of Grey erotic fiction, but it's not really going anywhere. Don't ask me for that, people. I'm not fucking going to release it. No,
It's coming in June.
No, it's not. It's not coming. It's not coming. No one's coming. just nonfiction for
So
here.
what's some of the standout stuff for you in the Own the Day book? Something that idea that I really like with it is focusing on one day at a time.
Yep.
And really drilling into that. I think sometimes we have these big ideas. I have my 5-year goal, my whatever. But then how you do anything is how you do everything. And most of the things we do, we're kind of like Doblik and shitty at.
Yep.
Like drilling into that individual moment, how I cook my rice is relevant to how I do the bigger stuff.
Right.
Is that, where did that idea come from with that?
I think it came from a frustration with like the existing 30-day, 40-day, 90-day programs that are out there that just get myopic. They focus on one thing and you do that, relentlessly. But if you fail, then you kind of have to start the program over. And I just saw it not really making significant changes. Like to me, you have to look at the whole system as interconnected. And if you really want to level up, you have to do all of it to really get it done. But to do all of it over a long period of time, that's daunting. So all I'm saying is, just do one day and don't even worry about the whole day. Just do it hour by hour by hour. Like I'll give you the first 15 minutes. Do these 3 things: hydration, light movement, first 15 minutes. All right, next thing, power shower, breath and cold. Next thing, all right, substitute the sugar for fats. That's your breakfast. Next thing, here are the basic supplements you can take if you want to take supplements. All right, next thing, here's your commute. What are you going to do in the car? What are the mindfulness and mindfulness? How are you going to enrich your mind while you're traveling so it's not dead time? Okay, great. Yeah. What are the 3 performance enhancing plants that you can have to help you while you're at work or help you accomplish things? Okay, great. What's that? What are workplace tactics? What's lunch look like? What does a good nap look like? What does a training regimen look like? What is connecting with yourself and having a glass of wine? And how do you do that the right way? What happens if you drink too much? How do you counteract that? What's a good dinner look like? How do you get ready for having sex later? What kind of sex is going to expand the mind?
How do we get ready for having sex later? That's the longest chapter in the book, by the way.
But maybe you just spent the longest on that chapter. Yeah. So if you really want to go into that, it's like biological. Like how do you prepare the nitric oxide like the raw components of biological stimulation? Nitric oxide is going to control actually the blood flow in your capillaries.
Which sun stimulates.
Yeah, sun stimulates. Yeah. Beets, arugula, pumpkin seeds, watermelon, dark chocolate, red wine. All of these things are going to basically turn on the gas for your blood flow. And blood flow is sensation. It's also erection and stimulation and actually happiness and a variety of different things. So those foods mixed with sunlight, mixed with actually laughter. Yeah, like if there's a difference, there's a study I point out where if you watch a scary movie, it actually slows down nitric oxide. And if you watch a happy, laughy movie, it actually stimulates it. So if you're trying to go to the movies and have some sex, definitely go to a comedy, not a horror movie. Unless you're into some other shit. But yeah, so all right, nitric oxide is one, and then hormones is another huge one. That's like the substrate that really is your sex drive, making sure that you're paying attention to your hormone optimization. From there, attraction.
How do we do that? How do we look at hormones?
Well, sleep is a huge one.
Yep.
You got to get your sleep and do your best. And again, I talk about napping a lot. So lifting heavy or sprinting hard, the body likes adapting to those high stress loads with particularly, testosterone and growth hormone rebounds that are going to be helpful. Getting enough sunlight, again, vitamin D, and a lot of things. It's kind of like an accumulation of different things. And if you're a woman, be mindful of those things like birth control that you're taking that are going to dramatically throw off your hormone balance intentionally, because it's really mimicking, some pregnancy conditions to prevent the egg from becoming available. So you're really tweaking your hormone balance quite significantly. And, birth control is a pretty amazing invention that I think a lot of us are grateful for, men and women. But at the same time, you got to be really mindful of what's the cost, and what cost are you willing to bear. And so those are some basic tips. And then if you're a guy who's, getting up there in age, or maybe you've been under a lot of stress, get your hormone levels tested. Look at testosterone replacement therapy and check that out, and check out what those other options are if the natural approaches just aren't working, and maybe your sex hormone binding globulin is too high, or maybe something else is happening. Definitely check out those options as well, because as your hormones go, so go a lot of things, including your happiness, including your sex drive, including your desire to produce into the world.
Yeah. I was reading one of the unnecessary ideas that I've been gathering in my notebook that I need to sort out is a rat tickling study in Japan, which is where all the good rat tickling studies happen. Mm-hmm. And
they're into that freaky shit.
Really, they're into it. And so
in between watching game shows where they have just a butt and then they have a contestant and they have like a bunch of butts and they're like,
yeah,
let's play Don't Fuck Your Mother. Ready, go.
Aubrey
and the guy's like, I can't tell which one's my mom. And then they end up fucking their mom. And then they end up like fucking traumatized for life. That's like a Japanese game show in a nutshell. That's like a real Japanese game show, is Don't Fuck Your Mom.
What was the special program that we had witnessed while you were in Venice? It was a Japanese butt show of some sort.
No, it was like a butt buffet. It was like a butt licking buffet.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they just expose their butts through these little holes, and then people come and
feast.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to bleep this part out. We're not gonna bleep words. We're just gonna have like an extended bleep. But so with the rat tickles, pretty interesting stuff. While they're tickling the rats, it was 4 days that the before after testing they did, from what I read, and what they found was tickling these little rats, they found neurogenesis. So they actually started creating new neurons in their brain, which I think we used to think that was impossible. And, natural killer cells and testosterone, like all this stuff happens just from tickling these cute little rats. So we're doing all this shit, and meanwhile, it's just like, wait, I have an idea. What if we just tickle the rats?
Wow.
And see if that has an impact.
Wow. There's just going to be a tickling outrage. It's going to be linked to you. A tickle burst that's starting to. I'm going to tickle the fuck out of people now.
Tickle them. Yeah. But I think that's one of those things, again, where it's like getting out of the way of ourselves and just having a laugh.
Yeah.
Or totally. Having a beer, or having a spit, or having a freaking smoking a ceremonial tobacco pipe, which I had a lot of resistance against. Now I'm like, no, I think I like it.
Don't take it so serious. We're not that fragile. We're just not that fragile. We can handle it. Like, relax. Can handle it. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, get the hell out of the way of ourselves.
Yeah, totally.
What else? I stopped you at the sex thing. I'll probably stop you again once you say sex.
To go with the sex thing, just to finish that off, then attraction too, and attraction modulation. Like, we're always covering up our natural, scent, which is one of the strongest sex, right? Sex attraction things that we have in our body available is these pheromones, is the smell of another person, and we're constantly masking that with deodorants, and which are probably toxic for you anyways, and other colognes and perfumes and other nonsense. So we're really giving ourselves no chance to really find both histocompatibility for having a baby, but also the fundamentals of attraction. Like if you're attracted to somebody, you got to know what they smell like. Like you gotta like get back to the basics there. And we think we're doing ourselves a favor, but we're not, because a healthy body smells great, and really I think we've become self-conscious of that. Other thing is just communicating, talking. We talk a little bit about power exchange and how that can facilitate flow states and transient hypofrontality, and how that can really be an awesome way to get out of your own head and get out of the way and experience like heightened states of connection, and a bunch of different stuff in there.
Yeah. You heard the t-shirt study?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's great. Where they had men wear T-shirts. I talk about that in the book.
Yeah,
men wear T-shirts over and over again, and then match up girls who are attracted to each different t-shirt.
Yeah. I wonder if perhaps a part of our relationship dissatisfaction, if that's happening, it seems like a lot of people experience that, may have something to do with the fact that we're masking ourselves from our actual genetic sequencing.
Totally.
Being
Like
able to
early on in
that.
the date, like just save yourself some time and sniff each other's armpits or each other's butts.
Or the
Like
genitals,
don't make it weird. Like, just
I
give
do
a little.
That.
I would do that if I could. It's just like usually like first date. Like
I don't have a lot of
no.
It takes a special kind of girl.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're listening.
But yeah, I mean, with any of my lovers, like I hate it when they wear deodorant or antiperspirant or whatever. Like, all right, maybe spray like a really nice perfume every once in a while, but don't like roll on some fucking shit stick from CVS, like, but God no, and you don't need to take a shower after you go work out for me to go down on you. Like, that's just not, it's not necessary.
I noticed that with females, if I'm not attracted, I pay attention. If I'm not attracted to the smell of their any of the parts, let's say vagina, but the whole thing, then I take that into serious account.
Totally.
Like, even if she's smoking hot, she's got a great career, she's funny, all that stuff, I'm like, I don't really like the way her pussy smells. I'm like, well, there's probably something there.
Yeah.
Is that terrible?
And sometimes it's temporary. Sometimes you got to have a little
Terrible
grace.
person.
Sometimes you got to have a little grace and say, all right, maybe she needs to up her yogurt. Maybe she needs to drop her fucking champagne.
We can work with it.
We can work with this. Yeah, there's a little imbalance.
In the day.
We get a little imbalance. Up the coconut yogurt, drop the champagne. We'll get back in a week. We'll give it another go. But if it lasts a long time, you might need to seriously consider it. But it's a fucking huge factor.
That's a big factor.
It's a huge factor.
What else do you notice with women? What are the things you're looking for? Since you're in an open relationship.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously it's really about, I was talking about this earlier in the workplace, but it's also about like emotional hygiene. It's like, what are they going to bring into an environment? Because I really want to cultivate an environment where people feel safe, where, people don't contract. So if they're putting out fear into an environment constantly, and if they're putting out judgment into an environment, I can be pretty inoculated and pretty immune to it, but I don't want to be in isolation with this person. I want to have them engage, with my life. And if they're the type of person that can't help themselves but do that, that's not a person that I'm going to find any affinity towards. Doesn't mean they have to have it all figured out. We're all going to have our moments. We're all going to have our shit. But in general, they have to be able to, work through some of their own stuff and get to that baseline of just love and communication and, seeing people through eyes that are tracking truth to some degree.
How does one define emotional hygiene? What's like, how do we even, some people will be like, what the hell does that mean?
All right. So if you have a cough and it's contagious and you don't cover your mouth when you're coughing around people, that's bad hygiene in general. Like, if you're just coughing on someone's face, like sneezing on their own keyboard, like, that's just rude. But we don't look at our emotions in the same way. Like, if we're going through something, that's time for you to, just like when you're sick, maybe it is time for you to isolate yourself a little bit, work through your own shit. And if you need help, like we sometimes need help, go to the friends who have that in their medicine bag that can really help you through those conditions. But it isn't your job to just spew that all over everybody else who's around you. Like, that's bad emotional hygiene. For example, I got in an Uber the other day, and there's this woman who is just filled with rage and just spewing her rage energy all over us as we got in the car, was honking at people the whole way. And that's just really bad emotional hygiene. Like, all of us are like, and then everybody on the road is like, she just wasn't able to work through that on her own. So she just pushed that over everybody else. So we're all going to go through shit, but having good hygiene is knowing, when you can find somebody who has that kind of medicine bag to help you, and when you just really need to keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Recently I went to this like dinner art thing with the girl, and then afterwards I was feeling a little bit drained. We were both feeling a little bit drained. It was bright lights and people trying to impress each other and all that. We got out, I was just like, oh. And then we were talking about, I was like, all right, well, we could like go do some dinner or something like that. And I kept kind of alluding to her, like, if you want to just go do your own thing, it's okay. You can do that. And she kind of called me out on it. She's like, Aaron, like, it seems like you want some time to yourself and you're putting it on me. and as opposed to just owning the fact that like you're feeling like you want to have some space right now.
Yeah, that's dope.
So coming to that point with yourself where you're like, you're willing to speak up for what actually feels in attunement for, your highest good.
Yeah.
But actually being willing to ask for it.
And also being with somebody who can accept that without that being a massive blow to their very fragile ego, where they've lost this validation, like, oh my God, he doesn't like me anymore. He wants to go home. He must not think I'm attractive. Maybe it's because I stink. Did I stink? Maybe I need to roll some more shit stick on my underarms.
Between my legs.
Yeah.
I heard him on the podcast.
And I think it goes, and that's why we have those fear responses, because people are, they haven't done the work to realize that it's not about you. It's like, everybody's acting largely independently, and all these things we think are about us are really not about us. They're really just projections, and we're just a mirror or someone who can engage in that, except in very rare circumstances where we can find that tribe where we really see each other and communicate at a deeper level of truth. But most everybody else is just, if they talk shit to you, if they write some shit online, they're talking about themselves, not talking about you. What they're doing is showing the world some insight into themselves, not pointing out some insight into you. But if you feel it, maybe you are a little insecure about that. Maybe that is some work that you can do to make sure that you're not looking for some external validation as well.
Yeah. How do you contain your own emotional hygiene?
Well, to be honest, I don't think my emotional hygiene is like that great. I think I've been pretty indulgent with just letting my people deal with it. But fortunately, my emotional work has been very high, right? So I wouldn't say that I'm really good at my emotion, because I'm always around people. I got to show up to work no matter what.
Right.
I got to interact with 100 people a day no matter what. So I don't take the time as often as I should when I need to if I'm going through something, and I do spill it out on people. But I'm also really good at understanding the root cause of these emotions. So that doesn't show up in the form of anger, doesn't show up in the form of judgment, doesn't show up in the form of some of the really toxic stuff that leaves a heavy residue. Yeah. But I'm constantly doing the work. I don't accept any negative emotion that I have as something that is necessary. I accept that as a transient position in my own prison, and I need to figure out how to get out of that. I don't accept the hypothesis that I need to feel any negative emotion. And so if I see it and it comes up, then all right, this is on me. How do I get out of this? I have the tools. How do I get out of this? It's a myth when you think you're going to change the external and that's going to fix your internal. Fuck that. That'll work sometimes, but sometimes you can't change the external. Sometimes there's things that can't be moved. There's things that can't be altered. So you better learn how to control your own emotions and control your own mind. Because otherwise you don't have a chance.
The sand has dropped. We have a real hourglass.
We have a real hourglass.
On an hourglass. This is maybe the fact of the podcast. Hourglasses are originally derived from the fact that it actually takes an hour for all of the sand to drop through.
Yeah, totally.
That was a new fact for I think all of us except for Aubrey. Aubrey was on that fact.
Yeah, I was keen to that.
We got a real hourglass here. I can't wait to help promote and support and all that. I enjoyed the book, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it, man. How do people learn about you and find all the stuff? OwnTheDayBook.com. So go there, check it out. We got some cool book bundle options. I'm filming a video companion course that's going to be available with the book for anybody who buys a couple of them. But if you're interested and you're curious, there's just a ton of shit in here. It's an accumulation of the best knowledge that me and all the people that I work with and a lot of people that and a lot of people we've gathered. It's the best we could put together. It really tries to cut through all the misinformation and really give a clear, guided path. So I'm really proud of it. I put my soul into this thing. So I hope people check it out and enjoy it. Thank you so much. And then we're going to go jump over on your side. Yeah. 24 Everybody's hours or so. Interested in this, definitely check out my podcast with Aaron coming up on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, because we're going to fucking get into some more weird shit. Drop deep. Yeah, we're going to smell each other's crotches. It's going to be awesome. Already happened. Too late. Too late. Wrap it up. Podcast recording over. Pow. Later.